participation of young people is not in the traditional sense. Most times they're blamed for voter apathy. However, if you go on online engagements,
Hello Africa, welcome to our podcast, Pathways of Peace at the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation. My name is Nyasha Mpani. I am the project leader for the Data for Governance Alliance here at the Institute. Today I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Lennon Monyae, who works for the African Peer Review Mechanism, which is one of the many organs that we have within the African Union space. Lennon, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast, especially this year as we celebrate 25 years as the Institute.
Thank you, Nyasha, for inviting me to the podcast. It's a great pleasure being here for the first time actually visiting the offices of the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation, and I think I come at the right time when you guys are celebrating your 25th birthday. So happy birthday to the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation. I want to thank you for all the great work you've been doing in promoting peace, justice, as well as reconciliation on the continent. It's great work that you're doing, and I think all sectors of society, particularly the youth, should be involved in the work of peace, justice, and reconciliation.
Thank you so much. I think to start with you, let's start with what's happening on the continent right now. Okay. We can see that the continent is facing numerous challenges in terms of issues to do with peace. We can see what is happening within the Eastern Congo, Sudan, which has already been forgotten by a large part of our continent. And the youth are heavily involved and affected with this instability. What's your take on these issues?
I think this brings us to the issue of youth being affected more by some of the challenges that are there on the continent that are largely driven by poor governance. Where there's no good governance, there's no peace, there's no security, there's no development. So yes, there are many hotspots of violence, internal conflict on the continent. So northern Mozambique in southern Africa has been affected for a very long time now. Mm-hmm. DRC has been like that for a very long time, and we witnessed the sort of falling of many peacekeepers, including South African peacekeepers, and those from Tanzania as well. You go up north on the continent, there's Libya. You go in East Africa, Sudan has descended into a civil war. So my worry as someone who works within the African Union is that we are not silencing the guns. The African Union has the big policy, flagship policy of silencing the guns, but I don't think we are achieving that strategic objective of silencing the guns. And at the rate we are going, if attention is not given to issues that have to do with governance across the continent and in many other countries, we might have challenges. We actually saw in Mozambique, nearly things went south, so to say, because of elections. And last year there were many elections that caused issues. We saw in Kenya, young people, Gen Z, coming out in the streets. So there's something going on that our leaders need to pay attention to. And any common person knows the issues, livelihoods. People are not feeling the dividends of democracy. People are feeling like democracy is not working for them. Hence the number of coups that are also taking place on the continent.
But there is an understanding that there's a school of thought that strongly believe that the youth are the architects of instability. For someone who has been working with youth for quite some time, what do you think is the role of the youth in this current continent where we are facing so much instability? And do you also subscribe to this notion that the youth are architects of instability?
Certainly no, I do not subscribe to that, and I wish to appeal to all the people of the African continent that are lovers of peace to remove that school of thought in their minds that youth are instigators of violence, and look at the more positive side of youth contributions to peace building. Youth participation has increased. What I tend to explain is that youth participate, but the participation of young people is not in the traditional sense. Most times they're blamed for voter apathy. However, if you go on online engagements, on TikTok, on X, YouTube, on podcasts, young people are actually having conversations and engaging and saying how they feel. So I think those in the ecosystem of governance, youth development, etc., need to shift the way they engage young people or view young people as just a start, so that they can attract young people to participate at the moment in the formal way that is acceptable, so that young people can actually come and vote. There's a need to start explaining properly why they should vote, why they should also actually participate as maybe members of parliament, why they should understand the importance of policy making, policy implementation, as well as following up on some of the promises. So for instance, here in South Africa, the SONA was last week, and there will be a lot of debates in Parliament on the very things that will affect ordinary young people. So I'll be very much happy in the near future if there's TikTok videos that are discussing issues of the budget, how much money is allocated towards infrastructure, how many jobs are going to be created, what is being done about education, us first, and etc. There's already elements of it in other countries and in other spaces where youth are very much organized, but it would be great to see more and more young people actively engaging in what I think are important aspects of their lives.
Yeah, you're very much right that it's important that some of these issues are condensed and are packaged and presented on platforms where young people are spending most of their times. I recall during the Gen Z protest in Kenya, when they were protesting against the finance bill, most of the information in terms of what was wrong with the finance bill, it was actually being channeled out through Twitter, and the messaging was also made simple with those who were engaging with young people via Twitter, via TikTok, which is a point that you're trying to stress.
But you must get me right, I'm not saying it's the panacea or it's the final, it's like a good solution to everything. At least you can engage more, and I like saying this to my colleagues that I work, that certain spaces that we go to, you sort of are preaching to the converted. You're trying to convert the Pope. So if more and more institutions, particularly that are working formally to improve governance, such as my institution and all other institutions, civil society organizations, could spend more time going to places where young people can be found and maybe educating and correcting some of the misinformation, because also online engagement is a lot of misinformation, and we live in the age of misinformation. So when you get information from credible institutions such as the IJR about certain topics, it comes with credibility. If you see it on X or on, I don't know if IJR has a TikTok account, but at some point it must have, so that certain generations that don't go on X, for example, or on YouTube, are only on TikTok, can actually hear some of this good messaging that you have, instead of them just listening to pop things and etc. So we need to be innovative, and I'm sure there's even other ways of engaging that will come in the future or that are currently happening. So for instance, the podcasting, it's been around for a while, and I know it's very much popular amongst the younger generation. It's a good way of actually engaging them, because young people on their phone and they're listening while they're training. We are living in the age of mass information, so I think there is a deliberate need to heavily invest in these channels of communication, without, of course, forgetting the so-called legacy traditional media. More people actually get their news on the continent, in Africa, through radio than any other means. Of course, we should still engage in radio, newspapers, and etc. But for those that, in this case, are heavily influenced by X, TikTok, etc., let's go to them and spread the good news of Agenda 2063, of the Sustainable Development Goals, of peace, justice, and reconciliation.